When painters unleash their inner emotions, it often brings out the best in them. Because of this, I have compiled a list of 25 paintings that convey sadness in a powerful way. Let's take a closer look at these paintings as they provide glimpses into the artist's psyche, or simply the things they saw around them. As you'll see, this video is definitely an artistic emotional roller coaster. Number 1. Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. This painting depicts Anna Christina Olsson, a woman who was paralyzed by a degenerative disease. She can be seen lying in a barren field as she appears to be crawling towards the house in the distance. It's a powerful picture that is only made stronger by the fact that we are looking at the scene from Christina's perspective. Wyeth was inspired to paint her as he owned a vacation house near the Olsson homestead in Cushing, Maine. He once saw her crawling in a field nearby and produced this painting shortly after. Number 2. The Old Guitarist by Pablo Picasso. Pablo Picasso hardly needs an introduction, but in the early 20th century, he was still an aspiring artist. The young Pablo had a rough time during the first years of the 1900s, and these years are now referred to as his blue period. That's mainly because he used a blue and dark color palette, and the subject matter was often depressing. The same can be said about this portrait of an old man playing the guitar on the streets of Barcelona. It's assumed that his desperate demeanor and worn-out clothes are a reflection of Picasso's own situation, as he lived in extreme poverty at the time. Number 3. L'Absinthe by Edgar Degas. L'Absinthe is the current title of a painting that was originally known as Dans un café or In a Café. It depicts a woman and a man with in front of them a half-empty glass of hard liquor. They couldn't be more lethargic than they appear in this depressing scene of the interior of a Parisian café. Although they sit together, there's a separation between them, and this conveys an extreme sense of loneliness. Café scenes, more often than not, feature jolly people, so it's clear that Degas wanted to depict the other side of the coin. Number 4. La Mélancolie by Louis-Jean-François Lagrenée. When you hear a title like La Mélancolie, you don't exactly expect to see a painting that overflows with happiness. This sad-looking woman wears classical clothes, and that's because this image was derived from a much larger painting by the same artist. Titled The Death of the Wife of Darius, you can see the same figure weeping next to the woman's deathbed. What's fascinating is that this work was completed in 1785, just before the outbreak of the French Revolution. Perhaps the sad look on her face was an omen of the tragedy that was to come at the height of the frivolous Rococo era. Number 5. The Night Café by Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh was a troubled artist who spent a lot more time than he should have in places like the one he painted here. The Night Café depicts a scene inside an establishment in Arles where the artist lived at the time. Here, homeless people and clochards could drink all night long, and this created a pretty depressing atmosphere. The Dutch painter understood the dangers of putting society's outcasts inside one space, and he once wrote about this to his brother Theo. He described the night café as a place where one can ruin oneself, go mad, or commit a crime. The distinctive swirling brushstrokes enhance the dramatic effect of what appears to be Van Gogh's own mental chaos. Number 6. The Death of Marat by Jacques-Louis David. What's sadder than painting one of your best friends lying lifeless in a bathtub? That's exactly what Jacques-Louis David did when he painted Jean-Paul Marat. The radical journalist and revolutionary suffered from a terrible skin disease, and only hot baths could ease his suffering. When he accepted a young female visitor named Charlotte Corday on July 13, 1793, he expected a curious Jacobin follower. In reality, she was a sympathizer of the Girondins, the opposing faction, and she murdered her rival in his bathtub with a knife. What makes this scene even more tragic is that he holds the invitation letter that Charlotte sent him, to which he agreed. Number 7. Spoliarium by Juan Luna. Spoliarium is the title of a massive painting by Filipino painter Juan Luna. This word was used to describe the basement of a Roman amphitheater where dead gladiators were dragged. There, they were stripped of their weapons and clothes and dragged further to be dumped in a mass grave. This gruesome painting is a reminder of the dehumanizing nature of what people considered to be entertainment in ancient times. It is also believed that the painting served as a metaphor for the colonial oppression experienced by Luna himself during Spanish rule in his native Philippines. Number 8. Automat by Edward Hopper. I could have chosen a number of paintings by Edward Hopper in this list of sad paintings, but I find his work titled Automat striking in this sense. It depicts a lone woman in an automat, a place where one can drink or eat while being served by automated vending machines. You'll hardly find a better place to convey loneliness, and Hopper magnificently emphasized this by painting a dark window in the background. What's intriguing is that this painting was completed in 1927, at the height of the so-called Roaring Twenties. Like in many of his works, Hopper envisioned that the rise of modern society would result in urban isolation. The painter's wife Jo served as a model, but he made her face significantly younger as she was already 44 at the time. Number 9. At Eternity's Gate by Vincent van Gogh. At Eternity's Gate is a painting by Van Gogh that is also known as Sorrowing Old Man. He completed it in May 1890, just a few months before he took his own life in a field at Auvers-sur-Oise near Paris. It was based on an earlier lithograph which he completed in 1882 in The Hague, which depicts an old war veteran. He brought the subject back up because he was suffering from a severe relapse of his mental health problems. Sadly enough, the talented Dutch painter was feeling just as worn out by his personal struggle as the man he depicted here. Number 10. Guernica by Pablo Picasso. Saying that Picasso's Guernica is a powerful anti-war painting is definitely an understatement. It features the Spanish artist's distinctive Cubist style and depicts the aftermath of the 1937 bombing of this town in northern Spain. The painting traveled all around the world after it was completed in Paris in 1937. Picasso was staunchly anti-war and used all the income from these exhibitions to raise money for Spanish Civil War relief. Unfortunately, the tragedy of World War II was just around the corner, and Picasso refused to bring Guernica to Spain until the country became a true democracy. It finally arrived in the country in 1981, about 6 years after the death of Spanish dictator Francisco Franco. Number 11. Nevermore by Paul Gauguin. Nevermore is the title of one of Paul Gauguin's most mysterious paintings. It was painted in 1897 during his second stay on the island of Tahiti in the South Pacific. You see his naked teenage wife Pahura lying on a bed, and she is mourning the loss of their first daughter. The word Nevermore is written in the top left corner, and the presence of the bird doesn't leave any doubt that this is a reference to Edgar Allan Poe's poem titled The Raven. Gauguin called this creature the bird of the devil who is watching this tragic scene. He painted this work in February, and in April of the same year, Gauguin lost his daughter in Europe. This devastating event adds an extra dimension of despair to this already extremely sad painting. Number 12. The Sick Child by Edvard Munch. Edvard Munch was the initiator of the Expressionist movement in the late 19th century, and many of his paintings breathe sadness. The Sick Child depicts his older sister, Johanna Sophie, who is accompanied by their Aunt Karen. It depicts the young girl while she was suffering from a severe case of tuberculosis, and unfortunately, she died in 1877 at the age of 15. Munch painted the original version in 1885, and he painted several more versions during the next 4 decades of his life. The fact that the Norwegian painter returned to the subject in his later years emphasizes what a profound effect this tragedy had on him. Munch suffered from mental health problems and severe hypochondria, and the death of his older sister likely triggered this. Number 13. The Honourable Mrs. Graham by Thomas Gainsborough. The Honourable Mrs. Graham is a full-length painting also known as the Portrait of Mrs. Mary Graham. It depicts the wife of Thomas Graham, a Scottish aristocrat who became a military leader during the Napoleonic Wars of the early 19th century. His life could have been quite different if it wasn't for the fact that his wife Mary fell ill shortly after they got married. They traveled south in search of a more suitable climate, but it wasn't meant to be. She died in 1792 near the town of Hyères in southern France at the young age of 35. Thomas Graham was so heartbroken by the loss of his beloved wife that he refused to look at this magnificent portrait of her for about 50 years. Number 14. La Douleur or Sorrow by Paul Cézanne. Most of Paul Cézanne's most famous paintings were completed at the end of the 19th century. This painting, which is also known as the Magdalene, was completed around 1868. This was a time when the French painter was in his late 20s and still trying to find his artistic path. It depicts the essence of grief, as you can see Mary Magdalene in grief over the loss of Jesus Christ. The figures are almost unrecognizable, as their faces consist of nothing more than a small number of thick brushstrokes. Cézanne managed to capture the essence of sadness in the distinctive style that he developed during the final decades of the 1800s. Number 15, The Acrobats by Gustave Doré. The Acrobats is an extremely tragic painting by multi-talented French symbolist painter Gustave Doré, which he completed in 1874. We see a family of 19th century circus performers, still wearing their circus clothes, as the mother holds her injured child. The child suffered a massive blow to the head, as the woman tightly holds a white piece of cloth against it. It's quite clear that nothing can help the child, and Gustave Doré confirmed that the little boy indeed succumbed to his injuries. The painter also mentioned that this accident happened during a tightrope walking performance. Accidents can happen in the blink of an eye, and the aftermath becomes tragically clear in this dramatic work of art. Number 16, The Wounded Deer by Frida Kahlo. This painting by the Mexican artist features a deer that has been hit by 9 arrows in a forest that features nothing but dead trees. Frida Kahlo suffered a large number of physical and mental problems, and this painting serves as a metaphor for her lifelong troubles. At the age of 6, she contracted polio and it crippled her right leg and foot. It was a miracle that she survived a serious bus accident when she was a teenager, but her injuries resulted in lifelong pain and distress. She painted The Wounded Deer shortly after an operation on her spine failed, and just 8 years before her early passing at the age of 47. Number 17, The Sad Message by Peter Fendi. As the title implies, this painting by Austrian court painter Peter Fendi depicts the delivery of a devastating message. The Napoleonic Wars raged for many years during the early 19th century, and countless people lost their lives. In this painting, you can see the dramatic moment when a wife learns that her husband has passed away on the battlefield. More specifically, the German campaign of Napoleon, also known as the Wars of Liberation. What makes the message even sadder is the presence of the little boy and newborn baby, who will never get to see their father again. Number 18, Inconsolable Grief by Ivan Kramskoy. This painting by Russian artist Ivan Kramskoy embodies the universal feeling of grief. It's a portrait of an unknown woman that was inspired by the death of his close friend, writer Ivan Turgenev. He painted her in such a way that it appears as if she's about to collapse at any moment. The tears in her hollow eyes, her pale face, and the black dress she wears almost overwhelm the viewer with sorrow. Kramskoy's magnificent use of light and shadow in the rather gloomy room further transforms this painting into one of the saddest artworks you'll ever come across. Number 19, Stańczyk by Jan Matejko. If there's one Polish painting that serves as a cultural icon in Poland, then Jan Matejko's Stańczyk is definitely it. It depicts the court jester in Poland during the so-called Polish Renaissance, which ran parallel with the Renaissance in other parts of Europe. He was employed by 3 Polish kings in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, at the height of the Polish Golden Age. Despite being part of the highest level of society in his home country, this painting conveys a deep sense of loneliness. Stańczyk stares into oblivion in a dark room while a party is going on in the background. Matejko painted this scene to serve as a metaphor for the contemporary problems of 19th century Poland. Number 20, the Arnolfini portrait by Jan van Eyck. This world-famous painting by Jan van Eyck doesn't appear to fit into this list of sad paintings at first glance. It depicts what appears to be a married couple in a rather comfy upper-class bedroom in medieval Bruges. Yes, there were worse places to spend your time in the early 15th century, that's for sure. The painting's symbolism likely reveals the terrible reality of what happened, which is the passing of the woman. Just to name one, the lit candle above the man's head contrasts the one that went out above the woman's head. More research revealed that it's likely that the woman died while giving birth, and that's why the man has such a somber look on his face. Number 21, A Dear Visitor by Max Kurzweil. It's not really common to see a sick man being visited by a horse, but this painting depicts just that. It instantly becomes clear that the man is seriously injured and that he has a close bond with his horse. The rather dull room enhances the emotional connection shared between the two. The horse is concerned for the man's well-being, and the uniforms worn by the two men sitting next to him indicate he was likely a soldier. The sad part about this story is that it's likely that the man is dying, and the horse was brought in to say goodbye. Number 22, Ophelia by John Everett Millais. Ophelia is a character from William Shakespeare's world-famous play Hamlet, and this painting depicts her final moments. Her tragic death has been described as the most poetically written death scene in the history of literature. Millais painted her while she was still floating in the river she just fell into. This particular moment, during which she is singing, is described in Hamlet as Ophelia being incapable of her own distress. Although her clothes temporarily catch air, causing her to stay afloat, they soon catch enough water to pull her down to her tragic demise. Number 23, The Meeting on the Turret Stairs by Frederick William Burton. This painting has been one of the most popular paintings in Ireland ever since it was completed in 1864. It depicts a scene derived from a Danish medieval ballad in which Hellelil was guarded by Hildebrand, Prince of Engelland. She fell in love with her guard, and her father instantly condemned the relationship, and he even ordered the killing of the young man. Hellelil is condemned back to her tower, and Hildebrand goes down to meet a certain death. This incredibly sad painting depicts the final moments of the young couple together on the turret stairs. Number 24, Anxiety by Edvard Munch. I could have added dozens of paintings by Edvard Munch to this list, and although this wasn't possible, I still decided to add one more. Anxiety might look familiar, and that's because it looks fairly similar to his iconic painting titled The Scream. The Norwegian painter once referred to the dark red sky he used in these paintings as a scream from nature. He encountered this troublesome experience when he was hiking on a mountain in his native Oslo. The peculiar figures he included in this painting serve as a reflection of the inner demons he faced throughout his life. Number 25, La Vie by Pablo Picasso. I'll conclude this list with another incredible painting of Picasso's blue period at the start of his career. He completed this painting titled La Vie, or Life, in 1903, which was around the same time that he painted the old Guitarist. Apart from the notion that he was still an aspiring artist living in poverty, there's another important event that triggered this gloomy period. In 1901, Picasso's close friend Carlos Casagemas took his own life after a botched relationship with one of his models. The depicted man in La Vie clearly depicts his deceased friend Casagemas, who is holding his lover. He makes a gesture to the woman on the right, who is holding a small child, and two paintings appear in the background of what appears to be a studio. The true meaning of this painting is still debated, but it's clear that Picasso was trying to find answers to the existential questions he faced following the death of his close friend Carlos.